Let's transition from the college football world to some fantasy football. We have some fantasy football league winners that we're going to be talking about today. Every single year, there are guys that go off in weeks 15 through 17 and win people their leagues. Perhaps one of those guys this year is Kyle Pitts, who went off last night on Thursday Night Football. I was unfortunately against him in a league, and you had him in a league.
Hmm.
So shout out to you. But we each have one pick per position. So, Braden, I will let you get us started with your quarterback league winner.
Sure thing. Before I go into my quarterback, I want to say that I'm starting a tradition this year where if I have a league winner who kind of comes out of nowhere, I'm going to buy his jersey. So I'm going to buy it off DHgate, so it's like $20 instead of like an actual authentic one. But I have a special place in my heart for Miles Gaskin from 2020, and that's kind of what has gotten this going for me. But anyways, my quarterback league winner is going to be Tyler Shuck of the New Orleans Saints. And this is a pick more for superflex leagues than it is for one quarterback leagues. I don't know if I could say that I'm starting Tyler Shuck in a one quarterback league right now, in a 12-man league, especially not in a 10-man or even an 8-man league. But his last four games, he's been the quarterback 12, the quarterback 23, the quarterback 12 again, and last week he was the quarterback 6. In his last three games, he has 20 total rushing attempts, 95 yards on the ground, and two rushing touchdowns. He's also throwing the ball quite a bit as well. In three of his last four games, he's attempted at least 27 passes. In two of those three games, it's been 38 or more. And he's got a pretty favorable schedule as well. Carolina in week 15 allows the eighth fewest amount of points to quarterbacks, but Shuck was quarterback 12 against them on the road in week 10. He now gets them at home. The Jets are right in the middle of the pack, 16th most points allowed to quarterbacks. And then the Titans in week 17 in the championship allow the ninth most points to quarterbacks. If you're able to start Tyler Shuck in those last 2 weeks, especially the Tennessee game, I think he could put up, potentially 20 to 25 fantasy points. I think he's a high end quarterback 2 for me down the stretch, but I think in that Titans game, he's probably inside my top 12.
And yeah, he's a very good QB2 to have right now, especially with that rushing upside. So I like that pick a lot. It seems like he's only been playing better as the year has gone on, and he's gotten more opportunities. I will go with another rookie quarterback. I will go with Jackson Dart. And if you have him, you're probably starting him already. This is more of a, if you have Jackson Dart as your backup quarterback going into the year, or you picked him up off waivers, and you're deciding between like him and Mahomes or Drake May or someone else of that nature, this is more what that is for. But Dart has finished as a top 7 fantasy quarterback in 4 of his 8 starts this year. His playoff schedule will consist of Washington this week, who is giving up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, Minnesota in week 16, who's giving up the 3rd fewest, but I think a lot of that has to do with teams getting up big and just kind of running the ball. There have been plenty of good performances against this Vikings secondary so far this year. And then Vegas in week 17, who has been absolute gold for opposing quarterbacks over the last month. With how much Jackson Dart runs the ball, I mean, he's got upside to be the QB1 every single week. So I think even if you have a guy like Mahomes or Drake May that you're going back and forth between, I think you got to start Jackson Dart if you got him.
Yeah, as a starter, he has just one game outside of the top 16 quarterbacks, which was ironically against Drake May and the Patriots prior to the Giants bye week. He's got 4 games as a top 7 quarterback, 3 games as the quarterback 3 overall. As a rusher, you talked about his floor there; it's very high. 6 or more rushing attempts in 7 of his 9 starts, and in 6 of those 7 starts, he has at least 50 rushing yards. And you mentioned his favorable playoff schedule. Sam, I'm curious to think here. Let's do a little exercise. Would you rather have Jackson Dart or Josh Allen for the last 3 weeks of the year?
I'm still going Josh Allen there. I'm not
Okay.
going to jump the gun too much.
How about Jackson Dart or Lamar Jackson?
With how kind of poor Lamar Jackson has been recently, I think I'm going to go with Jackson Dart there. I would need to look at Lamar's playoff schedule, but all things aside, I think with how each guy's been playing, I would go Dart.
You already kind of mentioned Drake May. Are you taking Dart over Drake May down the stretch?
I think I would. I think May's schedule is a little bit less QB friendly. It's very neck and neck between those two, but I would probably go Dart.
And then last one I'm going to go with here. I think I was going to put Hurts in here before he completely imploded last week. But would you rather have Jackson Dart or Joe Burrow?
Ooh, that is tough. No T Higgins this week. I think this week I would go Dart. Week 16 and 17, I would probably go Burrow. But that's tough.
Yeah, I tend to lean the same way. I think I would probably take Drake May over Dart, um, but it is certainly very close. And I think he's inarguably a top five quarterback down the stretch here.
Well, Braden, I'll send it back to you for your running back league winner.
My running back league winner is going to be RJ Harvey here. J.K. Dobbins got injured in week 10. Since week 11, which was RJ Harvey's first start, he is the RB10 in fantasy points per game. And over the last 2 weeks, he is the RB2. It's a very small sample size, but he saw 17 touches in week 13, 23 touches against the Raiders in week 14. In that time frame, he has 3 touchdowns as well. And a lot of it's, pretty sustainable volume. He has the second most red zone carries in the NFL over the last 2 weeks with 9, as well as 3 red zone targets, which only trails Kenneth Gainwell, who has 5. Denver does have 3 competitive games coming up. They've got Green Bay and Jacksonville at home before ending the year, or the fantasy year, I guess, in Kansas City. But I think that may even be more of a reason to lean on RJ Harvey. We're not going to see a ton of, Jaleel McLaughlin or Tyler Bade or Beatty, however you pronounce his name. I think it's going to be the RJ Harvey show going forward. I would be shocked to see him get fewer than 15 touches. I think there's a good chance he sees maybe 18 plus in all 3 of those games. And at that point, you're getting RB1 numbers. If you can get, 15 fantasy points out of RJ Harvey 3 weeks straight down the stretch, that is fantasy gold, considering where you were drafting him, or even if you got him off waivers.
Yeah, and I've got Harvey in a couple leagues in the playoffs, so I hope you're right on this one. I've been a very big RJ Harvey believer all season long. I'm glad to see he's finally getting some more opportunities, and I like that pick a lot. But my running back, we've got 4 rookies so far that we've brought up as league winners. I'm going to go TreVeyon Henderson. What a season it has been for him. A little bit of everything. He's finished as a top 15 fantasy running back in 3 straight games with Ramondre Stevenson out, and then RB22 and RB26 in those 2 games since. His week 15 through 17 schedule consists of Buffalo, Baltimore, and then the New York Jets, all of whom you can run on. As good as those teams are, their run defense is nothing special. And should the Pats even start trailing in any of those games, Henderson will still have value because of his receiving upside. So he has not found the end zone either in either of the last 2 games. I think that's going to change in these coming few weeks. I would be very excited to start TreVeyon Henderson if he was on my team.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more skeptical with TreVeyon Henderson. I do have him in a league where I'm tempted to bench him for maybe Woody Marks this week, and it's mostly because of the volume. We saw Woody Marks last week against Kansas City get, I think, 26 carries versus Henderson having 11. I'm a little bit concerned that in week 13, he was out carried by Ramondre Stevenson, albeit just by 1 carry. Ramondre had 12, Henderson had 11. And they had, I think, Henderson had 1 more target as well. So even amount of, opportunities. But it is a little bit concerning. Maybe you go into a game and all of a sudden he gets 10 carries. And even if he puts up 60 yards, if he doesn't score, that's not a great fantasy game. He's getting maybe 8, 9 points. So I'm a bit more hesitant on TreVeyon Henderson, but at the same time, his ceiling is so damn high. We could see 3 straight games where he puts up 25 or more fantasy points, and it absolutely would not shock me.
Yeah, and last thing before we move on, you mentioned the 11 carries. I was just checking as you were talking. On those 11 carries, he averaged 6 yards a pop. So maybe that entices New England to give him more of the backfield. Although
I hope so.
At this rate, if nothing has, I don't know what else will. But yeah, what were you going to say?
I've said I hope so.
Oh yeah, because it would be great to see him finally get some extended success. But Braden, I'll send it back your way for your wide receiver league winner.
My wide receiver league winner is going to be A.J. Brown. People were writing him off, including A.J. Brown himself, who told fantasy managers to drop him around the midseason mark. But if you held on to him, he has been phenomenal for you the last couple of weeks. In his last 3 games, he's put up 25 fantasy points. This is in PPR leagues, which was the wide receiver 5 in week 12. In week 13, he had 35.2 fantasy points, which was the wide receiver 1. And last week, when Jalen Hurts turned into Max Brosmer, he still put up 16 fantasy points, which was enough to be the wide receiver 17. He's seen at least 10 targets in 4 consecutive games. Prior to that, in his first 8 games, he had seen 10 targets just once, has 3 straight games with 100 or more yards. And he's got a very nice schedule coming up, too. He's got the Raiders, who you mentioned they were fantasy gold for quarterbacks. They're also fantasy gold for receivers. They've allowed the ninth most fantasy points to receivers this year. The Commanders in week 16, who have allowed the fifth most points to receivers. And then the Bills in week 17, who are right around middle of the pack, but Philly's probably going to have to throw a decent amount in that game. I'm not really super concerned about Jalen Hurts' struggles. I think A.J. Brown is mostly insulated from those given his target volume. Maybe it limits his ceiling a little bit, but I still think he has a very solid floor. And I would not be shocked if he puts up at least one 30 fantasy point performance over the last 3 weeks.
Well, I hope you're wrong because I'm relying on Devontae Smith in a couple of leagues, but there is no denying what AJ Brown has done over the past few weeks, like you said. So yeah, I think that's a very good pick there. I'm gonna go with Jalen Waddle here as my league winner. He's the wide receiver 13 in PPR through 14 weeks, and he's been very up and down. His last 4 games, he has finished as the wide receiver 11, the wide receiver 40, the wide receiver 48, and then the wide receiver 10 last week. Last week. But the playoff schedule is very, very good. He gets the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Bucks. Pittsburgh and Tampa have been very fantasy wide receiver friendly this year. The Bengals are the worst defense in the league. He'll need touchdowns to be that league winner, but I expect Miami will be throwing plenty, especially with a banged up Devon Achane right now. So I have Jalen Waddle in a league. I very much hope I'm right on this one, but I think he could be a guy that does some very, very good things these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, my thoughts on Jalen Waddle is that he's probably going to win you a fantasy playoff game, but which round he wins you is a complete shot in the dark. And maybe you're already eliminated by that point, and he wins you the third place game. So maybe that's still enough if you're going to pay out for that, but that's not what we're going for here. We're going for first place only. The Washington New Orleans games concern me quite a bit. That was the 2 week stretch. I think it was week 11 and week 13, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, the New Orleans game was a little bit less so, just because Miami dominated that game from start to finish. The Commanders game concerns me a little bit because it went to overtime, and he still had just 8.2 PPR points. The consistent volume he has is pretty good. It's something you can hang your hat on, but you can't really hang your hat on how many of those targets he's going to catch or for how many yards, and a lot of that has to do with Tua Tagovailoa as well as the opposing defense. So I do like the playoff schedule. I think he's got a ton of upside these next 3 weeks. In best ball, he's phenomenal to have right now. But as far as a redraft league or a dynasty league where you're setting your lineup every week, it's a little bit hard to trust him just given the inconsistency.
And yeah, I mean, right now he's scoring a touchdown roughly every other week. He has 6 touchdowns through 13 games. So if we can get like 3 total touchdowns over the next 3 weeks, I think that's going to be a very good thing for fantasy managers. So I don't need him this week. I've got a bye in the league I have him in. So if he could save that for the next couple, that'd be great. But yeah, I think it's going to be very boom or bust for Jalen Waddle. And then let's wrap things up with tight end Braden.
I'm going to go with Mark Andrews here, and maybe this is a little bit contrarian on my part because he's coming off a pretty abysmal stretch of fantasy football. His last 3 games, he's been the tight end 38, the tight end 17, and the tight end 46. However, since week 9, he is the tight end 10 overall. And in the 3 weeks prior to this rough patch, he was the tight end 9, the tight end 5, and the tight end 9 again. He faces the Bengals this week. He had 6 targets against Cincinnati on Thanksgiving, who have allowed by far the most fantasy points to tight ends this year at 16.6 per game. The next most is Washington, down at 10.9, which I think might be standard numbers. I don't know if it's standard or PPR, but for reference, that gap between Cincinnati and Washington in first and second place is the same gap distance-wise as Washington and the 29th most points allowed in the Las Vegas Raiders. So a very favorable matchup in the quarterfinals this week. The Patriots in week 16 are on the docket next. They've allowed the 8th most targets and catches to tight ends this year. And then the Packers in week 17, who have allowed the 10th most catches and the 12th most targets. And yes, Mark Andrews does have to split with Isaiah Likely, but they play different roles at the tight end position. Likely is more of a field stretcher versus Andrews being more of that kind of intermediate passing game guy. So I do think there's value for both of them. I would lean towards Andrews maybe a little bit more because he's less, big play reliant, as well as probably a little bit more of a red zone threat, although both guys have some value there. Regardless, I think there's a good case to be made to start both Ravens tight ends. I just think that Andrews has a little bit higher ceiling.
And yeah, the only thing that I would say on the flip side is just Isaiah Likely being back could throw a wrench into things. But yeah, the matchups for Mark Andrews are outstanding. And same thing, I've got Andrews in a couple of leagues, so I'm hoping you're right because yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, I'm gonna go with George Kittle as my tight end league winner. Uh, he's he gets three very inconsistent secondaries. That's how I'll phrase this. He gets Tennessee in week 15, he gets Indianapolis in week 16, and then Chicago in week 17. All of whom have been good for fantasy tight ends. In 6 games since returning from his injury, he has been a top 8 or better fantasy tight end in 4 of them. And the 49ers as a team are still in the hunt for a division title for as good as the NFC West has been. So they're going to have to rely on Kittle pretty heavily as their top pass catcher, I would think. And not that it matters, but superstitiously, last year in weeks 15 through 17, Kittle was the tight end 11, 3, and 5. So the point in that being he will be getting the ball when it matters. So I think if you've got George Kittle, you should be starting with confidence. And I think that, like I said, the 49ers are going to need to rely on him if they want to continue to have a chance to win the NFC West.
Yeah, Kittle is my tight end 2 this week. I've got him in our guillotine league where we redraft each week, so I do need a big week out of him down to our final 5 there. I'm a little bit maybe intrigued is the better word than concerned over what he did with Jawan Jennings coming back, because in the one game Jawan Jennings returned for before the bye, he was the tight end 15 after a stretch of tight end 2, tight end 2, tight end 6. But at the same time, you're starting George Kittle with the utmost confidence in him. He's got a great chance to reach the end zone each week down the stretch here. 3 really favorable matchups. And if you can see, let's say 7 targets in each of those 3 games, there's a good chance he's putting up, bare minimum 12 points. And at that point, you got to love your shot to advance in your fantasy playoffs.